All right, so this week we should really discuss part two of the inheritance lecture about typecasting instance of operator. And as usual, let me go over some announcement, and you can ask me some administrative question first before we get to the technical contents. Your lecture number 5C is more like a week number 9. It was released yesterday. So that one there, I want to highlight, you want to pay attention to two topics. One is about polymorphic method parameters. So method parameters, especially you want to connect this topic with callback value, which we spoke about when we talk about aggregation composition. And the second one is polymorphic method return types. You can think about these two are more like a small case studies or applications of what we spoke about typecasting and also polymorphism and dynamic binding. You know, we put everything together into these two new context. Right, so these two are the important topics you want to pay attention to for the lecture, and we should talk about it next Wednesday. Okay, and for your lab number 4, it's being released since Monday. So that one there, I would say programmatically it's not really complicated, but I think you want to really pay attention to about inheritance. Okay, so the inheritance. Later on, when I actually walk through the solution together with you after the due dates, I can actually mention, I can say more about the inheritance. But you can definitely refer to the students class and also resident students, non-resident students example that we spoke about intensively during the inheritance week. Well, you know, during the past 2 weeks and also this week. You can definitely find some inspiration for solving the problem, right? You want to take your time thinking about how to solve this problem in the more appropriate way. If you simply got lots of duplicates for your code, or without using much of the polymorphism or dynamic binding that we spoke about in the class, you're not really gaining much from the labs, right? So you definitely want to get as much as possible. If you got any doubts, you can ask me during the office hour, okay? I already got questions from yesterday in the office hour about Lab 4, so I really want to encourage you to get started. And the last one, we are pretty much test-free in the coming 2 weeks, including this week, but I just want to put you into perspective. If you look at the semester calendar, let's see what's coming, right? So if you look at the semester, we are now November 10th, we are now here, right? I think we're going to have our last 2 tests, written test and also programming test. So that's going to be on the final 2 weeks. And then after your lab 5 is due, we're going to have some study week and before the exam. I'll talk about the exam maybe later, not now. Maybe when we are closer to the end of the semester. Okay, but I would suggest take the opportunity for these 2 weeks to really catch up with the lectures. Not just be beneficial for your written test 3, but definitely beneficial for your exam. Your exam is supposed to be a comprehensive exam, meaning that everything will be covered in the exam, right? You really want to plan your way to actually get ready for that, all right? That's about what I want to say for announcement. Do you guys have any questions related to administrative stuff? Anyone? Anyone? I'll pause for moments in case you want to speak or type, either way. All right, hearing none, let me just move on. You can still ask me later. That's fine. The only I saw 2 questions on the Google Doc. They are not exactly related to inheritance, but since your fellow student asked, I will just address them, okay, properly. If you're really behind in the inheritance lecture, I cannot emphasize more. It would be your call to really catch up with it. Otherwise, as I said, you're going to spend more time digesting the contents. You don't really want to fall behind. Okay. All right. So the 2 questions were related to your written test number 2. Okay. The first one here, your fellow student was wondering about why this particular console tester, right? You can see we are doing a main method to simply output something to the console, okay? And they were wondering about why this design specifically is not valid, okay? So there are several things I want to say, first of all, okay? So for that particular question, we actually got maybe 7 or 8 different designs for you to choose. I put very specific feedback for each of the incorrect designs over there. I would encourage you to read them first to really see why they are considered incorrect. And then you can, if you got any doubts, you can definitely ask me. Okay. So I would say also refer to, but for this one specifically, since your fellow student asked, I can explain that. That's okay. So refer to the specific feedback on EECS. I think I put maybe for each of the 5 incorrect designs, I put it there on the EECS. You can definitely check it out. Okay, but what about for this one here? So there are certain principles we want to know first before we can judge whether or not the test is actually incorrect, right? So there are several things. Number one, okay, what will be the judgment criteria for correct design of test, right? A test is not just for you to confirm that something has worked, but also when something doesn't work, your test should really signal some error and terminate right away. Okay. Of course, it could be that confirming that everything. Of course, every method call you're trying to put in a particular test, everything works as expected. Right? Typically, you will just use the assertion like assertSame, assert equals, and etc. Right? That's criteria number 1. Number 2, if something goes wrong, right, it should signal the error right away. That's first part. Okay. If something goes wrong, if a method under test, for example, you can see we are testing for method M over here, right? We're calling method M twice. If you recall the detail from your test, the first call should not really throw any exception, but the second call should, right? That's what we assume. If the method under test does not work as expected, so there are 2 things we are expecting to happen for the test to be correct, which we also mentioned in the lecture. I think that's maybe in lecture 2B when we spoke about JUnit test. Number 1, some kind of error should be signaled. An error is signaled. For example, you can simply print out some fail to the console. That would be one way. Or even better, if you're using a JUnit test, if you simply use the fail assertion, it's going to terminate the program right away and to signal that you should get a red bar, right? Either way is fine. Number 2 is really what's missing in this particular test design. Number 2, the execution flow. The execution flow should be disrupted right away without going further. Disrupted without going further. So these are the general criteria for you to judge whether or not your design for the test is actually appropriate. All right, especially for number 2, it is actually what's lacking for this particular design. Let's see why. Okay, so let's look at this one here. You can see this is the first call, right? This is the very first call to M. And what we are expecting to happen, is no exception, especially no some exception specifically. Okay, no exception. I'll just say that for short. No exception. That's what we expect to happen. On the other hand, if somehow the implementation is wrong, and then we do have some exception thrown from the first call to M, in that case, we know that it should really fail, right? So that's number 1 over here. And error should really be signaled, right? So this part, signaling an error, is actually good. Signaling error. However, does it actually satisfy the second one? The execution flow should be disrupted right away without going any further. The answer is no, because you can see this part over here. This part over here will still be executed. Still executed, even if an unexpected exception occurred. unexpected exception occurred. Let me just put a star over here. Okay, at star. So that's why it is inappropriate. Only this part here is actually correct. That's correct. However, this part here, the fact that even after the test should really fail right away, but you can still actually go ahead and actually execute the second method call. That is not appropriate for the test case, right? Now you will just follow the same criteria as I mentioned here, and then you can try to judge for the rest of the question. Right? You should really see. And also, I got specific feedback for each one of them. You can also refer to them, right? Any follow-up question to this? Anyone? Of course, this particular written test, you're only asked to really select which one is correct and which one is not correct. In a later written test, I'm not sure, or maybe in the exam, you may not just be expected to really select something that's either correct or incorrect, but you might just be asked to judge. Given something, given a test, you want to write down some written responses to say whether or not it is correct. So for that, I would suggest that you actually, I would suggest that you read through my feedback on the E-class. That's kind of the standard answer I would expect you to write, right? But if you got any doubts, you can definitely reach out to me. We can talk about it, right? All right, seeing no question to follow up, let me just mention about the second question I saw on the Google Doc, right? That your fellow student posted. That one is really about, let's say this. If we got point V1, let's say that's one class that we spoke about in the lecture. Let's say object number 1 is maybe new point V1. Okay, maybe 3 and 4, doesn't matter. Okay, and point V1 is the class where we simply inherits the default equals method. And let's say we got another one. Let's say point V2, object 2. And that one there, let's say new point V2 and 3, 4. All right, so we got 2 separate objects. Well, we don't need to visualize it, it's very obvious. Let's say we got point V1, which is different from point V2, right? They're different types. That's something we can see. And there are different objects in the memory. So I want to draw specifically to your attention to what your fellow student was confused. If we try obj1 equals obj2, let's say assert. Let's say this is 1. All right. Let's talk about another one. Let's say assert same over here. obj1 and also obj2. This is nothing new. We actually spoke about it in your lecture, I believe 2B. I forgot which week it was, but you can definitely refer to it. We spoke about this in the lecture. I also justify in detail why it would be the case. But let me mention briefly. Okay, so here, if you are using the relational operator, you're basically comparing whether obj1 and obj2 they are the same objects. However, if you as a programmer, if you try to write this, it is important to make sure it is required that both operands, right? You can see operand on the left, operand on the right. Both operands have different static types. Oh, sorry, let me say it again. It would be an error if they actually got different static types, but it's required that they should have the same static type, meaning that this one has a static type that's the same as this one. Otherwise, it wouldn't even compile, okay? Or this have the same. How about say declare with the same type. Is it the case for this example here? No, because you can see object 1 is declared as this, object 2 is declared as this. They are different types, right? So that's why this will not even compile. Not compile. On the other hand, for assert the same over here, the 2 arguments over here are only expected to be an objects, meaning that you can pass anything. over there. And I will actually draw some connection to also refer to week 9's lecture, which is this week, on polymorphic method arguments, method parameters, polymorphic method parameters. Okay, very briefly. So if you look up the definition for assertSame in JUnits, right? It's defined this way. You would say assertSame statically can be any objects, object 1, and also any objects over here, O2, right? So that means when you pass the actual arguments, right, object 1, according to callback value, is going to be assigned to O1. Object 2, according to callback value, is going to be assigned to O2, right? So in this case, you can pass anything. So that's why you will just compile. But behind the scene, they are actually going to compare their references, and this will simply just fail, all right? So it's different, okay? So this one here is going to, it compiles but fails. Fail to, well, it's like a red bar. All right, so that's another the other question I saw in the Google Doc. All right, any follow up to this? All right, so that's about what I can see from the Google Doc. Do you guys have any other questions? Anyone? Let me see. For your programming tests and the labs, so your starter tests are only a starting point, as I emphasized. As I said before, you should really program your solution in a way that's actually going to solve the problem in general. So you should not really rely on the starter test only, right? Especially for the labs, right? Yeah, that's something I think it will be important to emphasize. I think passing the starter test is definitely good as a starting point, but you should definitely make sure your solution can also cover cases that actually are implied by the problem description, right? But for those of you who might be interested in going over your solution for the lab or the programming test, maybe against the grading test, feel free to drop by my office hour, not just this week, anytime until the end of the semester. If you'd like to get more feedback on your code, you're more than welcome to do so. I can go over them with you. Okay. Xiaohui, I hope that answered your question. Okay, good, very good. Yeah, good. I think I try to help you a little bit more for your lab number 4. If you look through the starter test class I gave to you, I also put certain like a Jackie suggestion. So those are kind of like a hints about what I may test actually on your submitted code when you submit it for grading, part of it, right? So you can look into them as well. All right, guys, are you okay in general? I know you should really have very, very heavy course load for everyone. I understand that. And but if you really got trouble catching up with the course, you're always welcome to have a chat with me, so I can maybe give you advice. But to really go through the lecture materials, I'm afraid I cannot do that for you. The best I can do is to record the lectures to the as high standard as I can. But the rest is really up to you, right? And then ask me questions if you got any. I wouldn't tend to think that you don't have any questions related to inheritance. Well, I would say maybe you haven't really got to that point yet. So you're welcome still to ask me questions later, but you want to do that as soon as possible, right? That's really something important, right? We only got 4 weeks left, not much time left. Okay, I'll pause for another moment just to see if you guys are okay, right? Can I give a brief example for upcasting and downcasting? So Marco, have you gone through the lecture about upward casting and downward casting? Have you done that already? Okay. So what do you mean brief example? Do you want me to give a new example, or you want me to go over what I said in the lecture? Can you be a little bit more specific what you want? So I'll be happy to answer. Okay. Let's say this. I'll try to come up with something on the fly. But guys, upward casting and downward casting is very important, right? So if you haven't gone through the lecture, please do. But if you like Marco, maybe you have gone through just one more example. Sure, no problem. I can do that. Okay. But you definitely will get asked questions for the written test number 3 and for short exam, right? All right, let me think about what we might do. Let's say this. Let me think about, give me a moment. Let me think about what example. Let's say we do, let's say we talk about a member in the university, let's say, okay? So we talk about university member. Okay. So under which we may have, for example, like a staff member. I would just say staff, and also we got maybe faculty, like me, and also we also got students like you. Okay, let's say faculty. I'll try to maybe create multi-layer so you guys can see. All right, and then over here, let's say we got another one, faculty, let's say students. All right, let me say faculty over here. I think there are two kinds of faculty. I'm not sure if you're aware. Either the faculty members who are more research focused or the faculty member who are more teaching focused. Okay. So faculty over here. So it's more maybe it's called the professorial stream. But I'll just say let's say research faculty. I'll say RF, research faculty. Okay. And there's another one that's more like a teaching faculty. Of course, if you want to make it even more sophisticated, you can also talk about like a either they're in the UVA, like a union for faculty, or maybe the QP faculty, right? Let's not worry about it, okay? Or teaching faculty, all right? Let's say for the students, over here, let me just say undergraduate students and also graduate students. Let's say only got these two, okay? So graduate. All right, so let's say we got these classes. And for the sake of demonstration, why don't we say that? So here, let's say every member in the university, they can apply for maybe YU card, okay? Let's say get apply, let's say PPY. How about that? That's your passport York account. Now, everybody can do that, right? And let's say for simplicity, let's say everything I mentioned here is a mutator. Okay, apply PPY is the everybody can apply for PPY, right? Staff can, faculty can, and students can. Let's say for students, let's say what would be you guys' privilege? Of course, you can apply for graduation. How about that? Apply to graduates. Of course, feel free to develop this example further, so we can you can definitely just to see more methods and more attributes if you wish. Let's say for faculty over here, let's say okay, let's say for faculty we can apply for grants, right? Either the grant for teaching and learning or the grants for research. So let me say this one here. Let me just put apply grants for faculty. All right, so these are the quick example to actually go through. Right, so the question was really about upward casting and downward casting, right? Let's take a look at one example here. And why don't we do that as a like a written test question together, okay? Why don't we try the following? So let's say I have member. Let's say member, let's say Alan is new over here, and then students. All right, and then of course you might pass some arguments over here. Let's omit the details, right? Let's focus more on the types over here. All right, let's say this, and then line number 1 over here, and line number 2, and we can do things like, for example, Alan dot apply ppy, and also we can do Alan dot apply to graduates. That's also fine. And also we can also try Alan dot apply the grants. Okay. You know what? Let me just try to maybe make one more method over here, so that'll be better. So let's say for undergraduate students, you can also maybe apply for internship, right? Apply internship. Let's say that's only for the undergrad student. I think for graduate student, maybe they have a different mechanism, but let's just say that's only the privilege for undergrad. And then we can also say Alan dot apply internship. Okay, all right, so now let's say we got A here, we got B here, we got C here, we got D here. Okay, so now question number 1. Which ones compile? Okay, that's question number 1. Yeah, why don't you guys try and put it on the chat, or maybe you want to say it out, either way. A, B, C, D over here. A, B, C, D, and which ones should really compile? Okay, I see some answer there, but if anybody want to try, go ahead. All right, so yeah, it's basically which one compile should only be determined by the static type. I can see a static type for Alan is member, right? In that case, even though dynamically it's actually students, doesn't matter. What matters is about the static type. Static type is actually member. In that case, only apply PPY will be can be expected. All right, so that means only this one is actually okay. All the others are not okay. Especially, you might be thinking about, what about apply to graduates over here? Given that dynamic type is actually students, why can we not say apply to graduates over here? Why can we not do it? Right? You got to refer to the typecasting lecture to really see the detailed reason. Right? Compiler simply cannot infer the dynamic type, so dynamic type is not relevant here. And if you really want to exploit the fact that we really got dynamic type students over here, you can do typecasting. Okay, so now if you want to do typecasting, given that currently it's actually already member, you can see this is static type member, which is over here. Whenever you do upward casting or downward casting, is really related to relative to the static type for the variable. You can see the member here is already at the top, so we cannot really go any further. You may if you really want, you can cast it to objects, all the way up to object, but I don't see any reason you want to do that, right? You should always stay within your hierarchy over here. Okay, so now the only thing we can do that'll be meaningful is do downward casting. So you can downward casting to any of the descendant classes over here, right? Any of them, right? Any of them, if you wish. Okay, let me try 2 lines over here. Line number 1, let me say 3 over here, right? Number 3, if I try to do casting, let me talk about anonymous cast, right? Which we also spoke about in the lecture. I'll let you study the lecture first. So what we can do is we can cast Alan oh sorry, when we cast Alan into, let's say here, students, Alan. Okay, let me just move a little bit more space for us. Dot apply to graduates. Okay, and let's say this is A, this is B, right? For B, we want to cast Alan to, let's say, graduates, let's say graduate students. Dot apply to graduates. All right, so we got A and B over here. We got A here. We got B here. All right. So now I got two questions for you. Let's go one by one. All right, so question number one. It should be question number two already. Okay, question number two. Which one compile for the cast? Between A and B, which one compile? If you have no idea what I'm trying to get into, then you're very behind in the lecture, right? That's already being spoken about in week number 8. So hopefully that will motivate you to really get started. Otherwise, you'll get big trouble very soon. All right. All right. Anyone want to answer? So for this one, question 2, which one should really compile? Okay, Xiaohui, both compiles. Very good. Anybody else want to contribute some answer? Anybody else? Okay, both because they were both descended. Very good. Yeah. So you can think about, we have Alan here, right? So you can see Alan has a static type member. One is to cast to students over here. The other one is trying to cast to graduate students over here. So they're both downward casting. That's very good. Okay. So about a cast, you actually compile. Casts compile. Specifically, it's actually downward. Okay, so that's one example for downward casting, right? Downward. And more to it, if you actually want to talk about whether or not the dot notation should really compile, right? In this case, you have to see what is the static type for the context objects over here. Let me use a different color. That's also something we said in the lecture. So also you summarize into formal rules for this week. Let's say for this one here, it's anonymous cast over here to the left of the dot. We're actually trying to cast Alan into students over here. Okay. In this case, when we are trying to apply to graduates over here, is it really possible though? Right? You can see Alan, and then we simply cast to students over here, right? So that means the static type for this anonymous cast is of type matching the cast type, that is students. And similarly, you can see this part here to the left of the dot. So that is also the context object, right? Context objects. And this part here also context objects. The static type is matching the cast type, which is graduate students. Okay, so now the question is apply to graduates part of the expectation for students and also part of the student for graduate students? The answer is yes. So that's why they compile, right? So there were several things I just said. Let me recap very quickly. When you want to talk about whether or not this line over here will compile, there are two things you want to compile. Number one, whether or not the cast will compile. It will, because of downward casting. Number two, you want to argue whether or not the dot notation will actually compile. In this case, because the context objects has the static type matching the cast type, which is students. In this case, students also support apply to graduate, so that's why it will compile. All right? That's about question number 2. So both compile. Okay. And let me just say a little bit more over there, just to be complete. So and also, so part number 1, the cast will compile. Number 2, the static type of the cast expression support as part of its expectation. Apply to graduates. Apply. Okay, let me just supports. Apply to graduates. Okay, so these are the two reasons. All right, so question number 3, which will be concluding question here. So question number 3. What happened at the runtime? Are they both going to run? When I execute this, are they both going to run? Or any one of them might run into some trouble at the runtime? That's the question number 3. Anyone? Again, we talk about A and B, right? Xiaohui, you said they cause class cast exception. Both of them? Are you suggesting both of them? Both. Okay, sure. Anyone else? Okay, that's okay. Marco, you said you want to say they run, but you're not too sure about runtime, right? Okay, and you actually saying the following. Let me read out Anne's responses. I like that, but you're saying the opposite. Okay, let me say that. Anne is saying that he disagree. You disagree because the dynamic type is the students over here, which and both students and graduates and also graduate student can satisfy the expectation for dynamic type. You're saying the opposite. Whether or not there will be a class cast exception depends on whether the dynamic type for the variable over here can satisfy the expectation for the cast type. So that's so you look at the wrong way. All right, so be careful. So this might be a good practice for you. You don't want to make the same mistake in the written test or in the exam. All right. Okay, what happened in the runtime? So let me say this. The answer should be, let me write it down. For A over here, let's think about this. Alan dynamically is of type students, which is over here, right? And in one case, you're trying to cast dynamic type students into students. So this will be okay because the dynamic type students can fulfill the expectation for the cast type. Okay, so that's okay. A is actually okay because dynamic type, I'll say S for students, fulfills expectations of cast type, also students. Right, so A is okay. What about B? If we try to follow, let me put B here, right? So B here, you can see we still Alan, dynamic type students. Can students satisfy the expectation for graduate students? Can students satisfy the graduate student expectation? No, you cannot go downwards in this case. All right. So for B, it's going to be a class cast exception. Because the dynamic type of Alan is students. Cannot fulfill the expectations of the cast type, which is graduate students. All right, so that's why it will be a class cast exception. And in order for a cast not to run into a class cast exception, you want to make sure, right? We also spoke about in the lecture different ways of phrasing it. You should really review each one of them. I'll just say one of them. You want to make sure the dynamic type is a descendant class of the class cast type. All right. So Marco, are you okay with the extra example? Does it make sense to you? No problem. Good. Yeah, guys, you can feel free to ask me again about the questions related to typecast or even earlier part of the inheritance. That's okay. But I think it's more important that you catch up with the lecture, right? Let me give you a little bit more motivation. Let me show you some diagram over here. Okay. When you go to week number 8, for example, okay, that's something you should really study as soon as you can. if you actually go to the notes over here, which we spoke about, so this is the diagram. I would suggest you really make sure you understand what's going on, right? Let me just show to you. I think somewhere I summarized about all you need to know about the cast. Let me just go there and then I'll stop there. Oh, by the way, did you guys notice that there's an A+ challenge? Okay, I'll let you look into it for the course. All right. And then over here. All right, good. If you didn't try that, I'm glad, right? Don't try that. Don't waste your time. But it's good for you to know why it's unsolvable or undecidable, right? For those of you who might be taking 2001, so you will hopefully you will actually try to link that into what you learned in 2001. Okay. Okay, I just want to show you a diagram before I ask for more questions from you guys. Okay, guys, this is a diagram, right? So here, this is from your week number 8. I talk about compilable versus exception-free cast, right? So given some static type, for example, Android, and also given some dynamic type like a Samsung, right? You can locate them in the diagram, in the inheritance hierarchy. And then you want to identify the 4 different categories, either compilable versus non-compilable, and also exception-free versus class cast exception, right? So these are the 4 categories you want to know very well. Of course, in the written test or in the exam, I may not give you the same inheritance hierarchy. I might give you something else. For example, I might give you something like this, or some extended version, or simply just something else, right? So you want to make sure you understand this very well. Okay, so that's about this extra example for you guys for downward casting. And also, we also review the story about compilable versus non-compilable, and also class cast exception or class exception free. Okay. All right. Any more questions about inheritance or anything else? Anyone?
I had a question, sir. So, when I was like reading and watching the videos, so there is a part where we talk about like upward casting and downward casting.
Yeah.
But I can't seem to understand why we would actually need an upward casting, since the upward casting is just like
Using
like
the
the object
expectation.
is already a descendant. Yeah, like they already have all the expectation.
Yeah.
So what would be an example where we actually say, okay, we actually need to do an upward casting?
It could be that. Good question here. So the question was, you can understand downward casting because you want to get closer to the dynamic type, so you can call more methods on the cast expression, right? You're wondering about what happened to upward casting. Should we ever need it, right? Okay, so let's say this. It's more about like access control. So let me give you one example for sure. Let me just write it down properly. Let's say access control. It's a good question. Access control for upward casting. Okay. Let's say for this, let's now still reuse this diagram over here. Okay, so you know what? I think or I can use the okay. Let me just copy this and clean that a little bit. Let me use the same hierarchy over here. Okay, let's say this. Okay, so we still have the apply, and then let's say apply, apply graduate, and also apply. Okay, good. Yeah, I'll try to maybe make some more well, not necessarily interesting to you, but at least closer to the reality. Okay, let me set it up, and then I'll talk about it. Okay, apparently we actually got something called apply PPY. And also, let's say we got, of course, it would make sense to say get PPY. All right, let's say we have that, okay? And let's now say we have the following students objects. Let's say we have, let's say here we got, member. And then let's say we talk about some undergraduate student. Let's say Jim. And then let's say Jim is an undergraduate student. New undergraduate students over here. Okay, of course, you might pass some information over here, right? And let's say we want to actually do, let's say Jim is a student at York. And of course, Jim may approach different departments or different offices for different purposes, right? For example, Jim may try to apply for some parking garage pass, maybe for next semester. And when Jim actually goes to the parking garage staff members, somehow for the access control, the only information the parking garage staff will need from Jim will be the PPY. They don't necessarily have to know whether Jim can apply for graduate or not, right? Let me just make it more concrete for you. Let's say we have a class over here, some extra class. Let's say we say, let's say parking office. Okay, just another class over here. And let's say we have a mutator over there. We can assume that's public. Okay, let's say apply for, let's say pass, right? And over here, we are simply expecting some member over here, right? Because as far as the parking office is concerned, they can apply the pass for either a staff, a faculty, or a student, right? That's as far as they're concerned. Okay, they don't necessarily have to be a student or have to be a faculty or have to be a staff. It can be any one of them. Okay, so member, let's say M over here. Okay, and then they want to do something about it, right? So now think about what can go wrong. Let's say, for example, if I say here, let's say we got some parking office, right? Just say PO. There's a parking office. Let's assume we have the context objects, and then we say apply for pass over here, and then let's say if we let's say this, you know what? We want to say, what if we actually didn't have the member over here? Let's say somehow, let me show you the incorrect scenario. In that case, we can say here we just got students. Let's say students over here. Okay. In that case, if we just got students and then we say apply for pass and then we just pass Jim to that. Okay, of course, for Jim, we have to somehow cast that into students. So we're doing a downward casting. So Jim is now cast to students. Students, and also we got Jim over here. Let's say that's what we have, okay? So far it's okay because you can see when we cast Jim into students, we are really doing from we are casting from member down to student. It's a downward casting. And then you can see this part over here is also students. That's something you will learn in week number 9 about when the polymorphic passing for the argument will be valid. That's something you will see in week number 9. But this one is also fine, okay? But I can tell you what can go wrong with this. Given that the static type for the parameter n is declared to be students. So that means over here, the implementation code can go very wrong. We can say, okay, while the student is applying for a pass, we can also apply for graduate for them, right? That's definitely wrong. So here we can say n dot apply for graduates. This will also compile because you can see m statically is a students. And then students definitely support apply graduates. So that's not that's syntactically possible, and also it will compile, but it doesn't make sense. Okay, so this one is actually wrong, very inappropriate because it's none of the business for the parking office to really apply for graduate for students. Okay, inappropriate because it's not the business of parking office to apply graduate for students. It might be just another office. Knowing that this can go wrong, in theory, or it's a possibility. So what we want to do is make sure whenever we are passing the students maybe into some method, let's say for the parking office, we want to make sure we give them just enough expectation on the objects, right? So there are two things we want to do. Number one, okay, so this is not going to work because of this inappropriate, right? So what would be right to do? The right thing to do will be two parts. Number one, we want to make sure we do upward casting to somehow hide certain methods which we don't want that particular caller, like apply for pass, to really get access to. We only want to apply for parking pass to only access the member methods, only the members method, but nothing more. Okay, so upward casting to restrict access to member methods only. Okay, so how do we fix it? Two things we got to do. Okay, number one, we want to make sure this part here for the caller should not be this specific. It should not be students, which will allow the caller to actually apply for graduate, as we said, is inappropriate, right? So what we do instead is to say member only. To say member only. And if we want to say member only, so we want to make sure we can only do we can only do something to do with the PPY of the students, right? Number one. And number two, we want to make sure on the student side over here, that's going to be called like a callee side. We want to make sure in this case member is already matching member, which is good. But what if hypothetically, let's say hypothetically, let's say this guy here, this one here is happen to be, let's say students. Let's say this one here happens to be students. In that case, passing students into member is actually not good, right? Because we are actually allowing some extra access. So what we want to do is to do some upward casting. So what we want to do is we want to say PO over here dot apply to pass. Okay, and then we want to upward cast just to member to make sure that we cannot really get any additional methods other than the member ones. Okay, so that's why we want to upward cast. So we want to say pass that into a students over here, and pass to a member, right? Members methods only. So that'll be a member. I'll summarize conceptually for you after I finish this example, and then you will say Jin, right? So the short answer is you want to do upward casting when you actually want to restrict some access to certain methods. For example, knowing that the object Jin can actually be called apply graduates when you really don't want to by the caller. In that case, you really want to do some upward casting to the member so that the static type of the expression being passed over here would just be a students. So it would just be a member over here, so that you can only call these methods without going any further to the descendants. Does it kind of make sense to you about the example here?
Oh yeah, it's totally clear now. It's just
Okay, very good.
restricting access and features to like the descendants and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, let me just say one more thing. I'm glad you actually got it. Okay, good. And one more thing to say. If you just compare Jin versus member cast to Jin, Jin cast to member, if you compare these two, I think that's really the answer to your question. If you consider just Jin and also Jin cast to member, right? That's also something we said in the lecture. In this case, in this cast expression over here, you can only call methods that's actually specific to member, which will only be apply to PPY. On the other hand, if you simply pass the students type of Jin, in that case, you will be able to maybe mistakenly, inappropriately use the apply for graduates, which you don't want. So you want to restrict the access. Okay. All right, good. So guys, any more questions? I think that's a good one. I think that one, it's a very good. I didn't really usually justify it just to leave down some space for Q&A, but I'm glad you asked. Okay, it takes some time. Yeah. Okay, any other questions, please?
I had another question that
Sure.
I just thought about it. So, if I know that if we have like if we're creating an object normally, like we're creating, for example, like in the notes or the videos, if
Uh-huh.
we're creating an object Android, for example, my
Mm-hmm,
phone,
mm-hmm.
we call new Android. And if we're trying to call, I know in some cases you want to call the name to know what is the name of the class you're in, and then you'll probably do like my phone that get class that get name, or I don't know if it's get name or get.
Oh, you know what? Okay.
So the question goes like,
Mm-hmm.
so if, for example, I have Android, an object Android my phone
Mm-hmm.
equals to new Samsung, for
Yeah.
example, S21.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm calling my phone that get class, that get name,
Yeah.
so in that case, um, like at one time, would I actually get the name of the Android, or would I
Yeah.
get the
Good question.
name
Yeah.
of the
Yeah. Yeah. I loaded up the diagram so we can talk about it together, so you'll be more clearer. Okay. Can you say it again? So the line you want to write is Android. You want to start with Android.
yes, like Android, and then it's my phone,
Okay. Sure.
and and
New.
and we're gonna say new
Yeah.
Samsung
Samsung. Okay.
Galaxy S1. Let's say
Okay.
Galaxy.
Sure.
So Galaxy S1.
No problem. Like that. Okay, very good. And then you're wondering about if we try, you know what? That's a good question. My phone over here dot get class, which is what we said in the equals method lecture. I'll review that quickly. And then you know what? To be honest with you, that's something you can also verify. I forgot if there's a get name method. Maybe there's something like that. Okay, let's say
Yeah,
there.
it's get. I think there is get name, and then there is also like get simple name.
Okay.
I don't remember if they return the same thing though.
Okay, get name. It should be the one. Okay, just tell you what's the name of the class you're talking about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. So this one here, let's talk about it. So Android is a static type, which is over here. And also Galaxy S21 is dynamic type. So we know that this particular substitution or variable assignment will actually compile because this is a descendant class of that, right? That's something we spoke about. I'm sure you know. And
Mm-hmm.
if we now want to say my phone.get class, right? Let's just kind of revisit what we said in the equals method lecture. So this part over here is actually going to get the dynamic type for my phone. So this part over here is going to retrieve the dynamic type of the context objects, which is my phone. And we know that my phone, currently, this is dynamic type. So that means get name over here should return Galaxy
Mm-hmm.
S21, right? This is important to know because I'm glad you asked. Let's revisit again why in the equals method we set the following, right? If you remember, one of the if statement was like this. We say if this dot get class not equal to obj dot get class. So now we can revisit this one to see why it's really returning false. It should return false. Let's see why. And we're going to say return false. This is one of the fragment of code. Okay. Whenever you say something that get class, it's just going to return to you the dynamic type and also object that get class, right? And then we said in the earlier Q&A, you can refer to it. So this one, every time you say get class, it's going to return the so-called information objects. Just to the object, for example, here, if you say my phone that get class, it is going to return to you the information objects for Galaxy S21. For two objects with the same dynamic type, if you try to invoke objects that get class, they will simply return the same information objects, the same. Okay, I'll refer to you to that particular part for the lecture, so you can take a look. But in this case, this .get class and obj.get class, if it happens that they are not the same information objects. So what does that mean? That means dynamically we are comparing two different objects. Okay. Now equals mean means that this and obj are two different types of objects. That means it's incompatible to compare. Yeah, the way I said it is like you're trying to compare apple versus banana. Of course, they are not equal to. So that's why you will just return false by default. Okay, does it make sense about this?
Yes.
Okay, very
yes.
good. Let me refer you very quickly to in case you want to review the getClass, which is also very important. If you go back to the equals method, okay, so that would be I guess let's see, this one here. I believe it's October 20th over here under week number 5. If you go to the recording for that, okay, let's see, and then show more over here, you will see let's see, I want to see, oh, there we go, over here. If you look at that particular timestamp, so that one, understanding the getClass method for returning dynamic type, you will see also one extra example which I spoke about over there. You can take a look.
For sure. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. No problem. All right. Any more questions? You can definitely accumulate more questions, for next time. But if you want to ask any more today, please do that soon. Okay. Okay, I'll pause for one more moment. We just about 1 hour past our time, which is not bad. But I think if you don't have any more questions, I would suggest, try to catch up the lecture if you haven't got a chance to do so. Okay. Okay, hearing none. All right. So I think I might just end the meeting now if you don't have any more questions. But I'm still gonna hold the same Q&A as usual tomorrow for the engineering section. But if you want to join again or watch the recording later, feel free. And next week, Wednesday, we'll talk about week number 9, which is the last part for the inheritance lecture. So you really want to make sure you can really finish the entire story about inheritance for the 3 weeks, by next Wednesday. That'll be my suggestion. That will really give you some good foundation for preparing for the exam as well. Okay. All right, guys, thank you so much for coming. And then I'm going to end the meeting now. If you got any more concern, please feel free to drop by my office hour. It will be the regular time today and also tomorrow.